welcome back to Indie Cult Horror, and I have another interview for you guys that I think you're going to enjoy. Also from the 2003 Horrorfind convention. I don't know about you, but I am a huge fan of the Evil Dead films. Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell, Rob Tappert, all those guys are just amazing to me. So here's the thing is I thought I knew pretty much everything there was to know. And then I get the chance to meet and talk to Tom Sullivan. Now, I'd seen his name pop up a few times here and there. A few books that are about the Evil Dead talk about him briefly. Tom Sullivan was a more traditional artist from the drawing, painting, sculpting side of things, who was also learning through Super 8 how to make his own movies, and he was fascinated with things like stop-motion animation. And he was trying to teach himself special effects. So he meets up with the crew. He becomes an integral part of what the look and style of the Evil Dead is. Horrorfind Weekend 2003, Tom Sullivan's there, and he had with him, he was touring with the Evil Dead Museum. So it's props and art from the original film. He gave us a tour of some of the props before the interview, and then he came over to our hotel room and sat down with us, so that was cool because he gave us quite a bit of time to answer our questions about the Evil Dead. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Tom Sullivan of the Evil Dead at Horrorfind 2003.
I'm wearing them in the movie when at the end of Evil Dead, when I first got to the audience, that's me. Here's the nostalgia dance. He turned to his audience. Oh, really? He's wearing it's a Thanksgiving turkey. Local family event. Jason, Howard died in the Stooge movie. They had a fake. And I've seen the movie. Come on, Chimp. All right, I'm coming. These were largely made just built up right on the face with tissue paper. Yeah, well, probably there. Yeah. Well, now they use special effects people to actually know this and make
Can't believe they're working no budget, base budget zero. Man.
I wore these gloves. You see them bursting out of people in the movie, that's me. Cool. I felt it was important to throw guts into the audience. Slap.
How about the real dagger? I want to see that one again. That was pretty cool.
No way to put your finger in here. Ow! Damn it! Screwing around with me.
Is that one of the real books that you guys used?
This is a special effects book. It's a stop motion book. In the beginning of Evil Dead 2, this is coming in, it goes and stops. Hang on, this is my sandwich from Evil Dead 2. When it stops, I replaced it at the same moment it stopped with this book, which had a cover made out of rubber material called Smooth-On. That looked like this. And which was amazingly stretchable. You can really stretch it out and it goes back and doesn't warp or anything. But then I animated the undulating flesh coming alive via stop motion animation. Here's ball and socket armatures behind it that allowed me to make tiny movements, enabling the single frame exploitation of the image. to horrify audiences and mystify them.
Very cool.
Well, I'm not supposed to tell you any of those secrets. Erase the tape.
Just introduce yourself to the camera and then...
Hello. I'm Tom Sullivan. I created the special effects and props, uncredited, unpaid art director for the motion picture The Evil Dead. I also worked on Evil Dead 2. Got a credit in Evil Dead 3, although I didn't do a whole lot for it, but I'll take the credit. And I was a sculptor and on The Fly Part 2, the Chris Walas sequel to the Jeff Goldblum The Fly. Hi. Any questions?
Let's start with, how did you get involved with Sam Raimi, Rob Tapert, Bruce Campbell, and the whole Within the Woods and Evil Dead, the first film?
Yes. Back in, I guess it was 1978 or so, my wife was attending Michigan State University, and I got to go along. And so while I was working on a sandwich shop and in my spare time painting and all that, learning my craft as an artist, I read in the Michigan State University school paper about the Michigan State University Creative Filmmaking Society, and this was a club that Sam Raimi and his brother Ivan had started, and the idea was if you were a student, you could get a discount on auditoriums and rooms for various events. And so they would rent a screening room with a screen where they could project things. And Sam would bring in his Super 8 movies that he had made in junior high and high school. And comedies, very much in the Three Stooges things. Titles like 6 Months to Live, Attack of the Helping Hand, The Happy Valley Kid, goofy little films. And they would show these and charge, like $2 or $3 and get a handful of students in, and normally they would pay for the room and a pizza for after the event. And we'd go over to their place and they'd show their Super 8 movies and I'd show my little experiments and stop motion and stuff. And so we just kind of hit a friendship off, big interest in film. And that's where it started. And after, I don't know, a year, several months, Sam started work on a script. The idea was let's make a movie, let's make a professional film. In the 70s, it seemed possible to do because of the proliferation of horror films. It seemed to be a great way to get your first film, make a career in filmmaking, because an exploitation film like that had more of a market for it than today, I guess. And so Sam started shifting from doing comedies, screwball comedies, to doing he did a Super 8 short called Clockwork, about a woman who comes home and she's got a stalker who's trying to get in the home, and she stabs him through the door, much like in Evil Dead 2, and I think stabbed him in the mouth through a hole in the wall or something, or a hole in the door. Well, anyway, it was just a short little 10-minute thing, and I did some titles, some art for the title, and that started it. And at the same time, Sam was finishing up his Super 8 feature-length comedy called It's Murder, that I assisted on some sound effects. At one point, a detective played by Scott Spiegel is being poisoned by this insane fellow played by Sam Raimi, and is putting poison in his cup of coffee or whatever when the detective is looking another way, and my sound effects were that was my opening. Then I did some poster for the premiere of it, and but then Sam started seriously looking at a script idea inspired by one of his classes in Egyptian history or mythology, but he heard the title, The Egyptian Book of the Dead, and thought Book of the Dead would make a great title for a horror film. So he came up with a plot. Didn't tell us anything about it. It was a big hush-hush secret. And so for the next year, several months, Sam was working on the script, and the idea was if they started, Sam teamed up with Rob Tappert, who was Ivan Raimi, Sam's brother, roommate at MSU, and Rob had already been in a couple of movies. He was the Happy Valley Kid, the story of a naive young kid who comes to MSU completely unprepared and is tormented by this bully, or this little psychopath played by Sam Raimi, and which drives the Happy Valley Kid over the hill, and he kind of goes Columbine long before the term became popular. And so anyway, Sam and Rob got along. Eventually they left the dorms and rented a room off campus, and that's where they were when I met them. So anyways, the plan was let's demonstrate to backers, our potential backers, that we can make a horror film. So a short was designed called Within the Woods, which is basically a half-hour sketch of Evil Dead. It deals with American Indian mythology as the catalyst rather than Babylonian, Sumerian, or whatever, and but had similar things. And Within the Woods, Bruce is the possessed one. Ellen Sandweiss is in it, and she plays the heroine, or the survivor. And Scott Spiegel is in that as well. And we shot that over a weekend in a farmhouse south of Marshall, Michigan. It was owned by the Tappert family, and which the basement of that farmhouse wound up in Evil Dead as the basement. And anyway, we shot this little half-hour film, and turned out pretty raw and gritty. If you put Within the Woods and Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, they go from Within the Woods being very, very grim and humorless to Evil Dead, which is very grim, dark, gory, with a little bit of humor. You know, that dark sense of humor. Then there's our Evil Dead 2, which is about 50-50. I mean, it's subjective, but that's about it for me. And then Army of Darkness, which is just a Three Stooges laugh fest. There really isn't a scare in the whole thing. But, you know, they go from serious as a heart attack to Stoogeathon. And so anyway, that was the tone of Within the Woods. Well, for the next year, they took Within the Woods around to small investor groups, you know, dentist, doctor groups that get together for things, friends of their lawyers, friends of their families, whoever had a couple $1,000s that could possibly be invested in it. And they would have a nice dinner, and then pull out the Super 8 projector and show this gory movie with blood and gore and all this stuff. It is very Evil Deadish in its intensity. And after a year, they managed to raise about 80 grand, and that was enough for starting funds to get cast and crew together. And we all headed down to Tennessee and started to make the movie. And that's the beginning of it. But it started off as a friendship with mutual interest.
Now, going from Clockwork and Within the Woods to Evil Dead, was there like a vast jump in the equipment that you guys were using and the amount of money that you were putting aside for your special effects, and just as amount, if money at all?
Yeah.
But I mean, was there a kind of like a pause and then like kind of move upwards?
Well, there was the pause was in the raising of the funds. The moving upwards, it wasn't really significant because knowing that they would not have a lot of money, they were investigating low-budget ways to, you know, produce the film, including they did some Super 8 tests where they shot a scene in Super 8 and then had it blown up to 35 and then rented a theater to see what it would look like. And I think Tappert told me that the grain in the film looked like the size of bowling balls, so it was just not going to work. And but they did end up shooting it in 16 millimeter. 35 was just way too expensive, and but it wasn't even Super 16. It was just regular And I don't know if you've seen the latest versions that ILM did, but it looks better on DVD than it ever did in the theater. And as far as effects and everything, I asked Rob Tapper what my budget was, years after we filmed it for Evil Dead, and he jokingly said, "What budget?" And literally, it was a couple $100 for everything. It was like a gallon of liquid latex and a gallon of foam rubber, some tubing, cotton balls, tissue paper, acrylic paints, because I didn't know about rubber mask grease paint, painting people's faces with acrylic paints, which the only way to remove it is, if the sweat hasn't removed it, you have to like scrub it off, which I'm so sorry. But we were all learning all this stuff, and I think the real step up was just in the ambition of everything. Instead of going, just for a weekend, which is fairly safe, here was a 6 or 7 week trip down somewhere, in Tennessee for Evil Dead, and that was the grueling part, just being away and missing people and all that. The pain went away on payday, as the Stooges used to say.
Excuse me. Did you guys give yourself a period of kind of experimentation and testing on the special effects before you went out there, or was it like middle of the cabin floor trying it out?
Well, I'd mentioned about Sam's secrecy about the script. That stayed up until about a month. I don't even think it was that long. Maybe 3 weeks before we were to leave for Tennessee. I got the script, which was enough time to read it, break it down into what effects were required, kind of guess how I might do those effects within my skills, and figure out what materials I would need. And so that was the whole, that was my pre-production. I did have time to come up with the cover of the Book of the Dead, and which was, I took a mold, I had molds of Scotty, Cheryl, Linda, or not Linda, I think Linda, and Teresa, and whatever their real names are. And I think the Scotty mold just put 5 or 6 layers of liquid latex. It's a liquid rubber, and when it dries, it turned into like rubber band material. Anyway, I peeled that off and glued that with contact cement over a piece of corrugated cardboard. Took some paper mache that was, for the inside of the cover, so it wouldn't look like corrugated cardboard, and instant Book of the Dead. I mean, it was really like a 15-minute job, other than the drying time for the latex. The dagger was made over the widest piece of aluminum I could find at the local hardware. Once again, no time, to come up with anything cool. And I took celluclay. It's a ground paper mache, and just stuck it over it, gripped it like this, and then shaped it. And Aliens had come out like a year or two before then, so I had these a Revell model kit, these little model kits, and I stuck all the bones in that, and I had chicken bones, and I stuck those in it, and the little skull and the spine going down it, and the rib cage on top, and it was, I don't think I painted it even, maybe a little black or something, and it was just instant movie history. I don't know. It's goofy how fast it got thrown together for the impact it had. I must be a genius, is all I can think.
Did you have any kind of reference points or anything you had in your head as far as what this stuff would look like, as far as like the pages and the Necronomicon and stuff like that? Was there anything you had in mind beforehand?
No, not at all. Originally, Sam, all he needed was paper in the Book of the Dead. Didn't need any artwork. There was never going to be a shot of the pages or anything. But being an artist and just almost a compulsive drawer, I wish I was, but I mean, I just love drawing. And because I get to show off, that I had all the pages, and so I would just draw them at the dinner table after I'd finished everything else, and chat with production assistant, now big-time movie director and TV director, Josh Becker. another friend of Sam and Rob's. And we'd talk movies, and I would just sit there and draw my pages. And I borrowed from the mythology of the movie. There's a page with white eyeballs before and after. There's decapitated body parts, which suggests the act of bodily dismemberment as a solution to your problem. And the vines, there's a page of vines, and things like that. Elements from the film I expanded into some kind of pseudo lore for the book. But each page has something that more or less fits into that. The name Necronomicon, I think, came in Evil Dead 2, and however, I was very aware of the Necronomicon, having been a Lovecraft fan for a number of years. I had worked on a previous film, never finished, never made, called Cry of Cthulhu. It was like a Harryhausen meets Lovecraft. That was the idea. Still a good one. And but it was never made. But I did art for it, and we got some publicity. And so me and Lovecraft have always kind of kept bumping into each other.
Let's see. Now, while you were on the film, and there's only so many of you crewing the film and working on it, were there other tasks that you ended up doing aside from the special effects and the art?
When I as soon as I arrived, Rob took me aside and said, "We need you as the uncredited, unpaid art director." The theory is they'll fool everybody into thinking we didn't make a low-budget movie if my name didn't appear in all the things I did. If one movie is, this guy did this and this and this and this and this, it's a low-budget film. Well, they avoided that, and of course, everybody thinks it's a very expensive film, so it worked out really good for them. Being sarcastic.
Did you have to live at the cabin with everybody?
No, we had a house. There was more or less a modern residential house that we all stayed in. Weren't enough bedrooms for everybody, so the actors got the bedrooms, and everybody else was on a floor in the living room. And since most of the shoot was at night, we had to sleep during the day, which is a really miserable thing when you're on a floor in a sleeping bag with pillows. And so I decided I will sleep in the laundry room, even though people are washing and drying, stepping over me. But I had to have darkness. There was just no other way. So,
going from Evil Dead 1 to Evil Dead 2, what did you actually work on, specific parts of Evil Dead 2?
Well, the big draw for Evil Dead 2 was there was going to be a huge battle between a flying deadite and a bunch of knights. It was going to be like a big Harryhausen sequence, a whole battle, And so I was looking forward to that, and I designed and built and animated the flying deadite at the end of the film. I also did the opening sequence where the book comes out and then comes alive and swallows the camera, and the ghosts in the vortex come out, and you see the book being written. That was weeks and weeks, months and months of work. And there's also a shot where Henrietta pops up. They throw Ash into the basement, and they're playing the recording, and then possessed. I forgot what the line is, but a head pops up. If you look closely, there's little animated worms in her head that pop right in real quick. And then it cuts to Ted Raimi in the Henrietta suit raising up, and my head doesn't look anything like the Ted Raimi Henrietta head. Although it was sculpted by Mike Tersick, who's an absolutely astounding sculptor. He did the maquette for the T-Rex in Jurassic Park, and I've seen pictures of him working on the head of the T-Rex. But he's an amazing. But what he did was my bust of Henrietta was created before we had ever seen Ted Raimi in the Henrietta makeup, so he didn't have a Ted Raimi reference. But the bust he made is an exact it's a beautiful sculpture of the actress who played Henrietta. And it's a small thing, and so if that had worked, but you couldn't have put that woman through the Henrietta suit and hanging on wires. You had to find somebody you could torture relentlessly, and Sam had a younger brother, or has a younger brother named Ted, who's perfectly willing to do that. And what a guy, what a kid! This is amazing. was so grueling to be in that damn suit. And what else was there? Where Ash's hair gets streaked white. I did that shot. There's a shot where as the streaking is going on, there's a withering flower. I did that. There was a lot of stuff attempted to do, but didn't wind up in the film. And I also created the props, the books of the dead. I designed the dagger. The blade was actually sculpted by Mike Tursick, and then my assistant finished it off, Brian Ray, who's also out in Hollywood now. And I think that's about it. But all in all, I was on Evil Dead 2 for about 10 months, and that was way too long. It was horrible.
So differences between the first one and the second one, were you given like a budget and
the
time?
The first one was a low budget, let's go make a movie, 13 friends, people who all pretty much knew each other beforehand. Evil Dead 2 was huge, 100 people maybe on the crew, all together, and there were like, I was one of 3 stop motion departments. There was Doug Beswick was doing some, and Rich Catazone, and there's a large makeup crew, Howard Berger, Greg Nicotero, Kurtzman, I forgot his first name, and they were working for Mark Shostrom. I think they split off and became K&B right after Evil Dead 2. And but then they also had people back in LA who were helping them. And then there was another group that made the Rotten Apple Head thing, and another group that made the deer head. That was then kind of revamped or refitted by Tony Elwood, who was the prop guy. And but the difference was a big movie, and all of a sudden it's really professional. You've got LA crews there, wouldn't talk, wouldn't smile at anybody they considered to be not LA. It was really bizarre. It's kind of like, I've heard the illusion that Hollywood is high school with money, and that nails it. Because it's still petty people. It's kind of depressing. You think it'd be cool, and hey, we're working together, but none of that spirit of the first film transferred to the second one, from my point of view.
So having so many people working on all these different parts of the film individually and everything, when you saw Evil Dead 2 and it was finished, how did you feel about it?
I think it works. I was horrified by my work, especially the last shot of the deadite blowing up. In the storyboard, Sam had given me a drawing that was like cropped to the head like this, of it exploding. And so I was thinking, well, you always give the director a little more than what he wants, so I built shoulders and arms and wings that went out to about here. Well, when we rigged it, and this was almost a life-size deadite, and when we rigged it, I was covered up in plastic underneath because the head had been made out of, I'd done a sculpture of the head, and it had been made out of gelatin and packed with like an M80 or something equivalent to that. And it was done by a licensed pyrotechnician. And so I'm underneath it with the rods to control the arms, and covered in plastic, and Sam set up the shot. Well, when he framed the shot, he framed it like out to here. So when you see it widescreen, you can see the ends of the wings, and you can see the hemp cord that people are using to flap the wings. And I'm going, you idiot, why are you doing this to me? It's like sabotaging this movie. And it was so maddening. And it's just that for all the work and all the time, so little of what I did wound up on the screen. And to add insult to injury, I was taken by Rob Tapper, and he said, well, we've got too many people, and we've spent too much money on the credits, so we're asking people to reduce their contributions to one word. And well, here I'd done props and stop motion on a number of sequences, so feeling, well, this really sucks. Okay, I guess I want to be an animator. Call me animator. So the movie comes out, I and the electrician are the only 2 people with one-word titles. All the effects guys have paragraphs. I did this and this and this, and all these things specifically listed. But I didn't get that. So people look at it and they're hardly aware I worked on the movie, and yet I started and finished it. And, you know, it's like, I think they're torturing me. That's what I think it is. But if I was ever asked to work for Sam again, they'd have to pay me. I insist on that. My hours on Evil Dead 2 wound up to something like minimum wage. Because I was putting in 80-hour weeks. It was insane. And I kept a log of everything that I did. And Evil Dead 1, I worked 7 months and I got paid for 7 weeks. Gripe, gripe, gripe. It's just, you know, if somebody to help me become a millionaire, I would treat them well, with a little modicum of respect. That's showbiz. But I'm not bitter.
I was just gonna say, did Evil Dead 2 kind of sour you from the
yes,
movie
very
making?
much, very much. Yeah, it really did. I thought, well, if this is how it gets, and then I worked on Fly 2 a couple years later, and although, you know, got to sculpt, and here was another very professional crew, and it was kind of like the college experience of filmmaking, because I really got to learn precisely how to do things a professional way. I mean, I'd been doing things out of my kitchen with just kind of winging it, and here people were, you know, working, just making beautiful looking molds and professional techniques and combining with animatronics and all this other stuff, and that was great. But also the bigger film I was working on, even though I was getting paid much more money on Fly 2, my contributions just, you know, you're just working in a factory, and that's just not that much fun. So that I went back to Michigan after that, because I also had a career as an illustrator concurrently with the effects stuff, and I just found that more satisfying. I'm the boss. I get to, you know, pretty much decide what I wanted. Fortunately, the company I worked for loved everything I did, and that went on for about 18 years. Now I just publish my own artwork.
So if you had a different opportunity, though, that was more of an independent film with effects and things like that and stop motion, would you jump at that kind of a chance again?
You know, I'd rather direct it. That's how I got started in all this. Sam and Rob and Bruce, well, back in the early days, it was Bruce, Rob wasn't in there yet, not till the college years, but Sam, Bruce, Scott Spiegel, Josh Becker, Mike Ditz, John Cameron, and a bunch of others, Ellen Sandweiss, all in junior high, were all making movies with Sam, and a number of his friends also wanted to be filmmakers, directors. So they would all have their own projects and all help out in each other's projects, which was amazing for them, because they are not only highly productive, they're all making movies. And in fact, they'd sometimes even make the same movie. You know, Shemp Eats the Moon is kind of, It's Murder is Sam's version of Shemp Eats the Moon kind of thing. Anyway, obscure titles I never see these films, but there's this healthy competition, you know, going on. And where was I going with this? Oh, all this came out of low budget filmmaking, but then I've lost my train of thought completely.
Directing?
Directing. So my story is here I am in a small town, and I had no friends who wanted to do anything like this. You know, nobody was ambitious like I was, and I was like manic about this stuff. And so what my opportunity is to do solo projects, and stop motion animation was perfect, because I couldn't get actors, couldn't get, you know, the kind of help you need to do that stuff. Parents not terribly supportive in this area. In fact, it was kind of an embarrassment to them. Dad threw out one of my stop motion puppets when I was a kid. It was a dinosaur. I don't want him playing with dolls. This is not a doll. It's a goofy dinosaur. It's, you know, not Barbie, Dad. I don't even have a G.I. Joe, which would make a great stop motion puppet. But anyway, I was stuck doing all my things alone. But I did a lot, you know, clay animation, and I animated paintings. You know, I had a cool little thing of a volcano erupting, and I repainted each frame of the smoke, you know, but it blows up, and just ambitious kind of goofy stuff, and a lot of little clay things. But building dinosaur dioramas was a lot of fun, and I'd film those. So I had all this solitary stuff, but the idea was to teach myself all the skills to become a director. Knowing I wanted to do interesting production values, special effects, matte paintings, miniatures, stop motion, whatever else, compositing elements together. So I was experimenting with all that and building up an understanding of how to do it. And when Evil Dead came around, well, I had those skills from mask making to filmmaking, you know, the whole thing. And so I was of use to Sam in that regard. But I want to direct. I've actually been a dinner theater actor. I was in a play, Frankenstein. I played the creature, did my own makeup. And, you know, I had done a number of civic plays and things, because I want to learn what do actors need from directors, what's that rapport all about. And I've also writing. I've got I'm working on scripts, and 2/3 of the way through my great English novel. Hi.
Were you a fan of horror films before getting involved with Evil Dead?
Excellent question, because no, I was not. I was, there was an attempt to raise me Catholic. It only took like in the neurotic senses, you know, but I never got the religion part of it all. But I was certain that violence in films would contaminate my pure thinking. So I wouldn't go see James Bond movies, Dirty Harry films. I didn't want to see anything where people were going to be brutalized or whatever. And then I then I ran into Sam and those guys, and they got to make a horror film, and it was suggested I you know, find out what's going on. And so I went and saw Dawn of the Dead in the theater. I had never seen the original. I mean, I knew about it, you know, but definitely not what I wanted. And the first 20 minutes like freaked me out, because it's so grim. I mean, it's so incredibly grim and hopeless, and you know, and it's not like a story is starting. It's just like you're in the middle of hell, and with a raid on the building with the people holding the hiding their zombie relatives and stuff. And then the folks escaped in the helicopter, and a zombie played by a guy named Jim Krug, who I've since met and is a wonderful person. He stands up on a box. He's a zombie, and the helicopter blades. And suddenly I got it. Oh, this is a joke. I get it. This is just fun. This isn't, you know, I was internalizing all this, thinking, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And then I'm thinking, oh, I get it. It's a joke. This is a satire. And of course, the rest of the film has that tone, that this is about consumerism in the era of, you know, Reagan or whatever, and those values. And all I could think of is, oh, this is great. I get it. And when I was a kid, my sister and I used to put on haunted houses. And we'd always heard stories, you know, you blindfold people and you hold out your hands and you put a can of spaghetti and these are the brains, you know, and all that kind of nonsense. And so I kind of took it, well, we're not here to assault people. This is just goofy, you know, this is our fun house. And so we're going to show stuff that's so over the top. But my defense to that was, I'm not going to study Grey's Anatomy or car accident photos or operation photos. I don't want reality. So it was my idea to come up with, instead of everybody puking blood and bleeding blood and all this red blood, I thought that's going to be too much. Sam, why don't we just assume that the possession changes your internal biochemistry, so any color can come up, and that's what we did. So it was yellow, blue, green, black, you name it, we came up with it. Milk was used at one point. And but that was my idea, and it was not about ratings like Nicotero and one of the other guys saying the Evil Dead 2 thing. It was my idea. They did it because I did it first. And so, you know, there was that kind of thing.
Quite the crash course in what's going on in horror to go straight to see Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, right. And I love that film to this day. It's terrific. And I've had the privilege of meeting Tom Savini on many occasions. There's a funny story with that. Is Sam told me, you know, always trying to let me know my value, that the only reason my name was ever on a Evil Dead poster was people would think, read it closely enough and think Tom Sullivan was Tom Savini. And when I met Tom, I told him, you know, I was thinking of changing my name to Tom Sullivini just to make that work more.
So who were your influences when you started doing effects work?
Ray Harryhausen, Willis O'Brien. Willis O'Brien, creator of effects for King Kong, and Harryhausen, his protege, I suppose, who an amazing career, made 18 astounding movies, and pretty much kept the fantasy film market alive through all those years. And but if I wanted to be anybody, it was like Harryhausen. I thought that was just the coolest thing. I just ate up everything he did. He collected the Super 8 movies, you know. Studied them on my little editor, frame by frame. Just how the hell does he do this? Every book I could find, got it. Magazine articles, have folders still of all my photos of stop motion animated creatures and anything to deal with that. Just huge pack rat when it came to that. And in art, my hero is Frank Frazetta, the illustrator. And so I always thought I had good models. And I've actually been fortunate to meet Harryhausen a couple of times, and I spent an hour talking to Frank in his studio, which was mind-blowing. He was looking at my book on Field Monster saying, gee, I can't do this. Stop, Frank, I'm not worthy of polishing your shoes, and you're saying you can't. Because his point was he draws things from, you know, he'll take a human anatomy, animal anatomy, and combine them. And I'm kind of taking shapes and turning it into stuff. But I was thinking all of my little goofy little things I'm doing with paint were all like little things I'd stolen out of his pictures. You know, the way he would do a tentacle or something, I would turn into the centerpiece of a picture, you know. So. But it was awfully cool, just so cool. Then I also got to meet Darlene O'Brien, Willis O'Brien's widow, a couple months before she died. She signed, "Oh, Willis would be so proud of you." That's neat. I highly recommend making the effort in a polite, correct way to meet your idols. And I found them all to be amazingly approachable and receptive and gracious.
Hmm.
So I try to pass that along.
Kind of along those lines, you're kind of new to this convention thing and actually going and meeting people who are fans of your work. How does that feel, kind of being on the other end of it?
It's freaky because for 20 years, I was never invited to a convention. And so it's kind of like, although I'd seen the Evil Dead when it came out in theaters with audiences, this is a different end of it. There's some things that really strike me, is the number of artists, professional artists, who have come up to me and said, the first thing I ever drew, or wanted me to learn how to draw, was your Book of the Dead. There's a young artist named Jason Moore who's an inker for DC and other comics. And he met him in Detroit, and he actually still had, you know, he's in his 20s now, but he still had his Book of the Dead made out of clay, you know, plastic clay over corrugated cardboard, and he'd copied the pages by freeze framing the VHS tape, and he still had it. And this was the thing that started him in art, and he's making a good living at it now. And I'm cool, and I've gotten that from other people. That's mind-blowing, because when I was 5 years old, I saw King Kong, the first half of it. He had to go to a lumberyard with Dad, so it took me another year to find out what happened. But the energy, the way I look at it, is the energy, creative energy, O'Brien and company put into King Kong was retained in that film until it was released onto me, and I written how it changed my genetic structure. I mean, suddenly I had, for a 5-year-old, I thought I had a great revelation, as if adults get to do this when they're grown up, sign me up. And so I started figuring out, what do you have to know to do this? And so I thought, well, you have to like dinosaurs, so I collected everything on dinosaurs and drew dinosaurs and made little clay dinosaurs and little dinosaur dioramas. And filmmaking, so I'd go read that, and by the time I was 10 or 11, earned enough money, $20 to buy a used 8mm camera, and started doing my own experiments. And would read more and find out about foam rubber and buy a gallon of that, you know, save up the $25. Oh my God, that's a lot of money. And make stuff with that, and made wooden popsicle stick stop motion armatures, ball wooden dowels, and it worked. You couldn't put foam on it or anything, but you could have a little, you could still make these popsicle stick ball and socket armatures. By itself, it worked great. You know, it wouldn't lift heavy loads or anything, but I made a little man creature, and it just animated, just to practice, learn my craft. And this went on. I just made movies and went on from there.
So you'd wanted to talk about some of the materials that you use and things like that.
Oh yeah, everything was pretty much off the rack. I mean, today there's an astounding arrays of silicones and gels and gelatin and foam rubbers and polyurethane foams and skinning and non-skinning and all these things. And but anything that was really exotic that I hadn't had you know, a clear understanding of, I thought it was best to steer clear of for these films. And so I just picked out what I could. In Evil Dead 1, my materials were a gallon of liquid latex, gallon of foam rubber, clay, modeling clay, tissue paper, cotton balls, acrylic paints, because I didn't know about grease paint, and you know, just a handful of things. In Evil Dead 2, it was a little more expanded. I found a material called Smooth On, which is a rubber that's amazingly elastic. You can stretch it, and then when it goes back, it retains its original shape. It doesn't, you know, pull out. And I used that for an opening shot of in Evil Dead 2. In the very beginning, it was written by the Dark One, and the book comes in. Well, it's a fake stop motion book coming in, and then when it stops, I replaced it with this book with the Smooth On cover, and behind the cover are parts of the skeletal features of the book that are attached to ball and socket armatures behind the frame of the Book of the Dead, so that it could appear, I could animate these the teeth and the eye sockets undulating underneath, and then the mouth opened and the camera zoomed in, so it's like swallowing the camera into a vortex that was superimposed in later. Well, so that's the Smooth On. The Deadite, the Flying Deadite at the end of Evil Dead 2, had a really interesting innovation I came up with for the skull. The actual Deadite was probably, if you stretched out the tail, which you never see in the movie, it would probably be about this long, and the head, the skull is about that big, about the size of a golf ball in mass, just squish it into a skull. But I wanted to have, since originally it was going to be a much longer sequence, I wanted to have expressions on this creature without having to sculpt each expression. That just gets problematic and doesn't really looks like you changed the sculptures. So what I came up with was the skull was sculpted out of Super Sculpey. That's it's kind of a clay-like resin, handles and sculpts very much like modeling clay. Then you bake it in the oven at 200 degrees, whatever, for half an hour, and it hardens up very hard. It's brittle, but you know, in a block, it's good, strong stuff. And that had a rod with a small ball bearing at the end of it, so that could be attached to a ball and socket armature, stop motion armature. The skull also had a bunch of grooves cut into it, one on each eyebrow, one down here under the chin, and then one up here on the top of the chin. And fish line was laid in the gullies and attached to the skin of the deadite underneath it. And the gullies went, but the wire would go, or the nylon wire went to the back where there were 6 hex head screws screwed into the back of the head of this thing. And the wire was attached around that, so if you tightened or released these screws, it would pull, tighten, or relax the expression. So I could, you know, raise and lower brows or give it a smile. And because the sequence was truncated, the only thing that survives, and you would have to study the deadite footage frame by frame, but in one of the wing flaps, as the flap goes up, the deadite is doing this thing, but you can actually see it smile, and it's really effective. It's so fast, but it did work. And I'd never seen a stop motion puppet with wires. I mean, they'd have wire with strings. It's basically a cable control animation puppet. And I'd known about wires that had stuck in there for like King Kong's eyebrows, but nothing like what I had, and I thought that was a cool innovation. I also managed some blurs in the wings too.
It's pretty cool. Well, is there anything else that you want to add?
Oh, let's see. I'm continuing on with my original dream of being a director and producer. I'm working on some scripts that I want to do, and thanks to conventions like this, I've been able to network with a number of really creative filmmakers and ambitious people in a range of interests. And we have kind of a loose assembly of people who want to make movies, and so it's kind of like who can come up with a script and get the ball rolling first, and so I'm kind of working on that.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome.
Hope you enjoyed the interview. Thanks for tuning in and staying with us today, and I will see you next time on Indie Cult Horror.